I don't think we have to build them their own community, but I think we have to put into communities that piece of social and connectedness that isn't there.
G'day, I'm Deborah Caldo, and welcome to the Red Giraffe Solutions Expanding Worlds podcast, where we aim to support you as you help your young person with additional needs plan for their future. A future where they are safe, secure, and live a rewarding and fulfilling life. From around the world, I share stories and share solutions from people making this possible right now. I'm a parent of a young person with additional needs, so I understand the challenges. Many of the people I've interviewed on this podcast have already helped me design a better future for my daughter, and I hope that they might help you as well to imagine what's possible for your young person. There's a TV series in Australia called Neighbours, and quite a few famous Australian actors and singers started their careers on the show. But the thing that I remember most is the very catchy theme song, and one of the lines is that everybody needs good neighbours with a little understanding. I don't know about you, but I've been lucky enough to have some very good neighbours. But I've also had some neighbours that I couldn't wait to get away from. But this idea of our children living somewhere with good neighbours is something that we all want. And in some ways it often guides the decisions we make around where they're going to live. So in this second part of my conversation with Ann Wilkinson, we're talking about neighbours and what that means at WeBUILT. One of the other things we also talk about is integration. And Ann talks about why this hasn't been possible, in part because the need was so great. And maybe that's something we need to acknowledge, that we won't always get the perfect solution. Although, as Ann also says, there's an awful lot of people with and without additional needs who want to be part of a community. So maybe this will be something that happens more organically rather than by design. Ann also shares some tips for anyone thinking about doing something similar or even replicating the WeBUILT model. So let's get straight into the second part of my conversation with Ann. Can we talk a little bit about the community side of things and how that works?
The community manager lives here with her husband. There are always people here. It's a neighborhood, and we don't staff 24 hours a day, so there's nobody on call here. It's just a neighborhood. But we have a dinner meal we share, and we have people here. It's not as integrated as I wish it could have been, but the need was so great. And to listen to parents tell the story and know how it feels to not have anywhere for our kids to go, we just stopped thinking about it being half and half. And then there's a lot of people who live here who are on the autism spectrum, but who don't require any services, don't use Social Security or Medicaid. And then I wonder, how do you decide then how many of our residents are disabled? If some of them don't even need any assistance of any kind, any help, then are they disabled? Clearly they're on the spectrum, for sure. But outside of a challenge, an unexpected something, you would never know. And people who come and visit, they're like, why is he here? And I said, play a game with him. He can't lose. Ask him to do something that he wasn't planning on you asking. So there's things that work because it works for them, because they have their own space and nobody's coming in unless they're invited. And they really spend very little time in each other's homes. The girls all have a girls' night and they take turns hosting that. But probably half the members here bring their own breakfast to the party barn in the morning and eat together. They would never eat outside or ask somebody to meet them. They just show up and they all know they're going to show up. Initiating and planning something with someone else is still a goal we have for them. It's just really hard. They will look on the board and they'll sign up and they'll see their friends signed up and they'll sign up underneath them. But for them to say, hey, are you going to coffee and library tomorrow? That's still out there. We're still hoping that can happen. So then we have a full-time chef, and so he's always in the barn when he gets there in the morning, and he makes things, and he'll repurpose leftovers if somebody doesn't have lunch or they want to get some lunch for Saturday or something, or they're having friends over, their parents over. We have different jobs on site, so we have a pretty expansive permaculture system where we grow all of our own salad for sure, and quite a few of our own vegetables and fruits. A little more than half, I think, of what we consume, we grow right here. We're trying to go for 100%, but we're not there yet. So we have some kids who are pretty restrictive eaters, but we're not going to eat chicken nuggets every night. So it might be chicken strips, it might be baked chicken, it might be chicken breast, it might be barbecue chicken, it might be chicken chunks or popcorn chicken. So we can make chicken a different way, but each time we make it a different way has to be exactly that way and that flavor. You can't make chicken strips barbecue because they're not chicken strips anymore. So it isn't that it has to be the same, it is that it has to be predictable. I think that's where people think that people with intellectual disabilities just want everything to be the same every day. And I don't think that's true. I think they just want it to be predictable and they want to have some new and interesting things presented in a predictable way. I need to know ahead of time that on Tuesdays something new is going to happen, or I'm going to go to some different place, or a different person's coming. It isn't that they need everything exactly the same. They need it to be predictable. And that's what I hope that people understand when they come here. The other thing is we give no direction. It's all choice. So if you're too loud in the barn, the choice would be you can be loud at your house or you can be quiet in the barn. If you can't sit by somebody in the car because they have their music too loud or whatever, you can choose to stay home or you can choose to pick a different car, see if someone will trade you places. We just solve all the problems through choice. And it has changed everything. Almost everyone who lives here had been aggressive, at least verbally, if not physically, and struggled with just getting along in the family. We have a guy who we call the mayor because he is the happiest guy in the world here. And he does all the tours and he is just the greatest ambassador of WeBUILT. And his mom said about a month after he moved in, she said, I can't even recognize my own son here. He was so hard to be around. He controlled the TV and he controlled the volume because he just talked a documentary over the TV. He didn't want anyone else to be there. He wanted control over everything. And he was just miserable and the family didn't want to be around him. And she said, now we can travel together, we can go places. And almost all of our kids now go home. I call them kids, I know they're adults, but they go home for holidays. Many of them travel even out of the country with their parents, and they all say, I would have never thought this would have been part of our lives. In fact, one of the residents was going on a trip with her family, and she was telling us where she was going to go and what she was going to do. And I said, what are you looking forward to the most? And she goes, I hope we're all going to snuggle in bed and watch Saturday Night Live. And I just thought she was so nasty to her mom when she moved in. And for many months after, it took a long time to recover the relationships for some kids. And now the thing she's looking forward to the most was that. And it was like, that is so cool. The other thing that is surprising to me is just how much empathy they have for each other as a group. And I always tell this story because I think it was the turning point in how they became so empathetic. Some of the guys who had lesser needs for social help came to me and said, all those guys who have more needs, all those guys get to go bowling and we'd like to go bowling too. And I said, oh, you can go. I said, they started their own league. You can go with them. And they're like, we're not disabled. And I said, oh, I said, I suppose if you went with them, somebody would just think you were their staff. And so they went. And the kids who function at a lower level beat them so bad that they came back and they're like, they have their own ball and their own shoes and they're really good. And just from that day on, those other kids had a different value in the group. The whole division just stopped. And now there just isn't a time when you would see somebody get up from the table and move because somebody sat down. We started our community with little tiny tables and all different kinds of places to sit. And nobody would sit. Nobody would come in because they didn't want the social pressure of what if somebody doesn't sit with me? Or what if somebody tells me not to sit here? So they just didn't. They took their food and they went home. So we've got this big giant slab table. It holds 25 people. And now everybody eats here. And now we have a second table. So we have a social table and we have a quiet table. So if you're just not in it for the noise, you can go to the quiet table and nobody's going to bother you. And you can talk or not talk, but it just works. So I always say, buy the biggest table you can afford because your kids will find a way to sit together.
When you do these Zoom calls, what are some of the things that you tell parents starting the journey? What kind of advice can you give them?
I think typically we're looking at getting a nonprofit started so that they can have a mechanism to take grants and donations. And then deciding who is going to own the land in the beginning, because a parent has to buy the land and then get it built and then transfer it over. And then the transfer process happens. Somebody's investment in the community has to be the land. Maybe that's just their buy-in, or maybe they get some of that back. Maybe it costs more than what their buy-in is. And then I think it all comes down to one person. There can be a committee, there can be all kinds of help, but ultimately one person has to decide and then pay the bills while it's being built. So the people who've tried to do it by committee are struggling because you just have to jump in. You just have to take the risk. And so a lot of it is about the sleepless nights, not knowing if I was going to be able to make the payment this month. And I said, now the advantage of being able to fly here and see our place, which we do, we fly people here all the time to see it, see if this is what you want. And then a lot of the work, about the first year and a half of the work is already done for you if you just want to be a WeBUILT. You can use our plans, you can use our legal documents and all of our process. You just get started. And so typically we talk about challenges either with the county or with the build or getting the land approved to be able to do this. The biggest challenge, I think, is that it's never been done before. This is the first one. If a second one can get done, then I think the reality of this is a legitimate process, because right now it's, oh, unless we have an Ann, we can't do it. And that I don't think is true. But I was a dog on a bone and I couldn't not. And I still, to this day, the people who live here, those parents still say, it sounds too good to be true, so there just must be something about it that isn't right. I couldn't have done it without them, and I was going to do whatever it took. I was not sending Wally to a residential lockdown unless he can't live anywhere else. I think he's too much for here, and it's too much for him, and he will move to the new property. I told my partner, if this doesn't work, we're not going to do anything else. And then in January, she said, I think you're going to have to build another one, and I'm fine with it. Because you won't ever be able to come home and we won't be able to live in the same house. I said I could go to the coast and buy a duplex and hire somebody to live on one side and take care of him. And I could go a week or 2 weeks a month and give that person a break. But I won't know if he's being well taken care of or not. I won't know if they're treating him right. He's a hard guy.
I'm going to say you're almost a victim of your own success, that it's expanded to the point where it's not right for him.
Yeah, this one is too big for him, and we will make a little one.
Parents, they decide, for example, like you are in the situation where you extract yourself from that community. I'd imagine parents would think, I've done all this, and then if my young person decides it's not right for them, what happens then?
So then they just sell their ownership shares back to the group, and then we pick the next person. And they buy in. It takes about 5 minutes. We've had a couple of kids that we just couldn't care for well, and we asked them to go, and mostly because of addiction issues. They just were the least predictable people in the world when they were using, and the greatest kids in the world when they weren't, and it killed us. But we have, and we've had a couple kids who left, whose parents said, I lied to you to get them in. I know they've grown so much from being here, but we're going to move before we get kicked out. And we worked with them for a long time.
I guess I want to finish on the big picture thing, really, and where you want this to go, and also how you think, just in general, housing for our young people should go. What should the direction be?
I think our country decided that everyone had to be integrated, both for work and for living. And just because you live in an apartment building doesn't mean anyone else in that apartment building will ever speak to you. And just because we have sometimes a bit of odd behavior or noise, nobody cares here. And so when people come here to look at our community and they ask our residents, we're going to build one of these in North Carolina, or we're going to build one of these in Texas, what should we do different? And every time they say, make it bigger so we have more friends. Ultimately, I think they could live in an apartment building as long as it has that social connection. The other thing I think that separates us from everybody else is that we make their house fit them. It is exactly what their passion is. It's exactly what they love and how they love it. We have a guy who has pink polka dots over his entire house and Hello Kitty stickers on the walls. People will come and they'll be like, is he going to get his house remodeled to be for a man? I'm like, that is his house. This is his choice. And I think that's the thing, is that if you came here and you met our residents and then you went and looked at their houses, you could match them up in a second because the house just fits. And I think we value our residents through that, through making that housing fit and being okay with whoever you love and whatever you love. And we love it too. And we'll make your house sing that song. I think that adds a value for our members that living in an apartment doesn't. And I think the social connection, that there's a dinner meal, that people know there's somebody in the barn if I need help, that there's somebody here who will help me. And I think that's where we have to go. I don't think we have to build them their own community, but I think we have to put into communities that piece of social and connectedness that isn't there if you live anywhere else. It's just not there. They don't all have the same disability. They're not all the same. It started out for people on the spectrum, but we quickly learned that nobody could initiate if we didn't get some other kinds of disabilities in here.
So really the work, when we say inclusive communities, the focus should be on community rather than inclusive.
I think that's it. And I think that there are people in this world who love the idea that they can make a difference all the way till they die. We have all kinds of people in different communities who are like, yeah, I would love to live there. I don't want to live by myself. I think if we position these communities by big churches, that people who have lost their partner, lost their spouse, would readily go in there. I think we could eliminate assisted living homes if we could do communities close to church so you can still have your own home, but that social piece is still there. We in the United States, we put people in assisted living, and my mom spent last year in assisted living and hated it and died. And they said she would. If you put her in there, she's just going to die. They just don't do well and when you take them out of their own home. And she didn't want to come here. It was too far. But they were so good to her. Those staff loved her. They were so good to her, and she hated every minute of it. I think she could have lived here and she would have still been an active member of the community and not somebody who waited for something to happen to them. She could push a button here and somebody could come. She wouldn't have had to been on the schedule of somebody else deciding when she was going to take a bath or when she was going to take a shower or when she was going to go to the bathroom. That could have been all her choice. And I think that there's a lot of groups that could benefit from this kind of community building.
You've talked about aggression and people coming to the community. Do you think that the aggression diminishes because people get choice?
They don't get any direction, and they have their own home. It has a big refrigerator. It has a washer and dryer. They don't have to go to the laundromat, which is a horrible sensory experience. You don't know what it's going to smell like. You don't know who's going to come in there. There's nothing predictable about a laundromat. But here, if you have your own place, I think the contentment is so much higher because it's theirs and because they're not going to get a direction. We see everybody every day. So you can't just hide. I tell new kids when they come, they spend a lot of time in their house trying to figure out who they are now because they're in their own house. We tell them, we want you to be part of the community. We want you to come out. You can have dinner, or you can work with the chef, or you can work in the gardens, or you can go to an activity, but we need to see you. We need to know who you are. And we want to be able to support you to do the kinds of things you want to do. But there's no, you have to go, you have to this, we just don't. It's just a neighborhood. You don't have to, but we want you to.
I think it's pretty clear why this community works for the people who are part of it. And it's about that choice and having a sense of control over their own home and their own space. Community is a powerful thing as we support each other and share our knowledge. The whole ethos of this podcast is sharing, because by doing that, we make it just that bit easier for the people who follow us. And I hope that Anne gets to do lots of those Zoom calls with other families, and of course that her son gets to move very soon to the home that's right for him. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that the stories and the solutions shared on here help you as you support your young person to create their future. And if you know anyone who would find the ideas useful, please share the podcast with them. Of course, if you want to, you can leave a review, because that is another way families who need this information can find it more easily. This show is created as part of Red Giraffe Solutions. To find out what the Red Giraffe is all about, visit redgiraffesolutions.com, where you'll find more resources around daily living, relationships, purpose and financial security. I'm at Deborah Caldo on Instagram and Facebook. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a conversation with you on any of those. Bye for now.